currently, we're taping on Wednesday, September 18th. I have to stop and think for a second there. And it's a very important day. Not only am I taping on a Wednesday when Mercury's in its exaltation sign, but I'm also training when Saturn, which has been retrograde for the past several months, finally goes direct. And that should present some really significant changes for people. So let's talk about Mercury. I'm just going to give like a brief, just a quick rundown of why certain times of the year are important and why planetary changes are so important. Basically, every year around this time, schools start. So this is around the time that Mercury is exalted. So it seems like a perfect time to inspire young minds. Okay, so Mercury's also a lot of frenetic activity, a lot of youthfulness, a lot of youthful enthusiasm. So you'd think it would produce fairly good results in schools, but it also has a low attention span. So this is one of the reasons why not all children, but some children have trouble paying attention in school. But it is a good time to start learning. And I'm coming on the heels of I'm taping right in the middle of the session in which politicians in the United States are campaigning. So we're going to have elections in November. In Indian astrology, mid-October through mid-November is the time when the sun, which is essentially the leadership planet in Indian astrology, is debilitated. So it's a perfect time to look at your leaders and say, I want to keep that person in some more, or I want to see that, I want to overthrow that government. And basically that's essentially what we have in the United States. Is we have a shifting governmental structure which allows for the peaceful, in some elections not so peaceful, but for the peaceful change of power in the country. So essentially we have this opportunity to purge or to get rid of elected officials once every 2 years. That's not unique. A lot of other countries in the world do it, but I think the timing in the United States election is particularly significant because it really shows, I think it sort of shows the United States' overall dislike and distrust of centralized government. If you look at the United States chart, it's there as well. There are a lot of different influences in the U.S. chart. It's too detailed to get into right now, but there is definitely a distrust for too much power lying in one individual's hands for too long. Even if a person is elected for multiple terms, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean so you have people who get elected multiple times. It doesn't mean the system is failing. It just means that the person's doing a good job, and we want to keep that individual in. If there's some change or there's some disruption in the environment every 2 years in November, in the time in which the sun has fallen, which is the leader, in the time in which the leader has fallen, that gives us a chance to change leaders. The other thing, so we're talking about Venus is exalted on around St. Valentine's Day. That's when we're all kind of, our emotions are kind of sentimental, or we're disappointed that we don't have anyway. Sun is exalted in Aries. That's when the government has the most authority. So April 15th to May 15th, the sun is the strongest. That's tax season. We have to file taxes April 15th. So there's a certain astrological symmetry to these events, which is really kind of uncanny. And I'm not saying these events were actually set up this way. It's just that people chose opportune times to get these particular placements in order. The sun's in Jupiter's sign around Christmas time, so that seems to be around the holiday season, and that seems to be a good time to celebrate or to worship. So Sun Jupiter conjunctions usually mean people go to temples. So all these things tend to mold together to give you sort of like an idealized astrological layout of what happens when certain planets are exalted or debilitated. The moon gets exalted and debilitated once every month, so you really don't have anything to tie the moon back to. Mars is erratic too, in terms of when it's debilitated. Jupiter's every 12 years, so you really can't, 12 to 13 years, so you really can't gauge anything around that. Saturn is in the same sign every 30 years. So this is significant. Saturn's sort of although Saturn and Jupiter share a cycle every 60 years. And Rahu and Ketu change cycles every 19 years or so. So they end up in the same sign they were in 19 years ago, every 19 years. So essentially, when Saturn goes direct, when it changes motion, you'll see all kinds of things that were locked or not moving forward, especially if they have to do with hard work and a lot of sweat and a lot of muscle. You'll see those things tend to start to move forward. And you'll also see certain things that had been delayed, like let's say events connected with justice, or events connected with equitable distribution, or events connected with helping the poor. Saturn is a planet which is connected both with very poor people and with very high authority. So essentially Saturn is an administrative planet. It's the planet that rules muscles, and it's also the planet that rules the poor and the disadvantaged. That is, those people who have very little. It also rules over things like structures or institutions. It was interesting. I was coming down the street on the way to cable TV today, and I saw the former church and church school on Brock Avenue that's being converted into a police fire station. I saw them actually taking the top of the steeple down, and it looked like certain construction work was starting. I saw Shelby from Greater New Bedford Cable TV down there. I was almost going to wave, but I refrained myself. And essentially, it's interesting that those projects tend to move forward. So when Saturn is retrograde, like over the past 5 or 6 months, what happens is projects will start, but there'll be all sorts of problems or delays or technical issues that come up when long-term projects are being set up. When Saturn goes direct, it's really a marvelous time to put into effect some of the changes in your life that you want to put into effect earlier this year, and you just felt blocked for some unknown reason. So it's time to move forward. So if you want to go into a new career, especially if you want to go and help the poor, if you want to go and help anybody, this is a great time to do it. If you want to start building anything, when Saturn is direct, it's a great time to do it. If you want to start paying back debts and obligations, this is a great time to do it. So Saturn direct will tend to actually bring things to fruition over the next few months. It's also been in the same sign with the South Lunar Node, which is Ketu, which essentially is really a very spiritual but also a rather destructive planet. So just as projects were getting ready to move ahead, all of a sudden you'd have these large events. Like the best example I can think of maybe is the Notre Dame fire, because Notre Dame had this very, they were working on renovations, right? So they were repairing something old. Then all of a sudden there's this accident. Ketu rules over accidents. There was a Mars aspect on Saturn and Ketu, and the work got set back, and it was a very destructive time for that old institution. So essentially what happens now, there'll still be some confusion over the next few months, really until February, about what you exactly want, because Saturn will still be in the same sign with Ketu, and Jupiter will join that sign. Will join Saturn and Ketu around November 8th. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction will only last really for around 1, 2, 3 months. Okay, so it really only lasts between November and January 31st. So I've heard all sorts of dire predictions for Saturn direct and for the Saturn-Jupiter Ketu conjunction over the past few years. And I actually bought into some of them a while ago, but I'm looking back to the last time this particular conjunction occurred in Sagittarius, in this particular sign. And we had the start of the Franco-Prussian War, which was a very important war, but it was really short. It was really incredibly, I think it was over like within about 6 weeks. It was really an incredibly short, or within 6 months. Very short war. It changed the power structure in France, and set the stage. It was an important war. It set the stage for World War I, but it really wasn't in terms of, it was significant to the French, but it was significant to the world, but later on. So we're not going to see, we're going to see some kind of activity, maybe some aggression over the next few months. Depends on where Mars is in the chart, to be truthful with you. But that's a probability that I wouldn't downplay. But I don't think it's going to be very significant. I don't think it's going to affect most people's lives. You may see a conflict, and I'm going to check the chart in a few seconds to see where I think these things are going to happen, but I don't think we're going to see a major catastrophe. The other thing is that when these three planets form together, so you can expect some more. Just to go back to the Saturn Ketu conjunction, you can expect some more what I would call natural catastrophes, accidents, explosions, even unfortunately, some more gun violence over the next month or so. But I think you'll also see more people trying to come together and figure out what's going on. How to correct it. So essentially, I'm just pulling up a chart right now. So essentially, nothing to really be afraid of. Saturn and Ketu are actually in the process of moving apart right now, and it will actually help people plan a little bit. Saturn will be with Ketu over the next month or so, so this will probably be the most difficult month, the next 2 months between now and December. But again, war, if there is a war, kind of a really small one, and if I were to choose a location, and I'm not at all convinced that's going to happen, to be perfectly honest with you. I am expecting to see some governmental changes I need to pull this map a little closer, in Turkey, and again, I'm not talking about all-out regime change, but certainly government changes. Parts of Brazil, trouble with the government in parts of Brazil, Western Canada, and Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and perhaps New Guinea and Australia. also, just to be aware, China, especially the west coast of China, has an affliction connected with this particular planetary combination. So does India and India not so much. I'm sorry, India is not really on the plate right now. It will be later on in the year, but not right now. And Western China and Hong Kong should continue to be areas that are problematic. Scotland looks problematic for England too. So, or for the UK, excuse me. So those are the areas I see essentially the biggest problems in terms of overall changes. Saturn and Rahu are most potent over Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Russia. So that would be the part of the world I would be watching right now, and also Brazil, especially the east coast of Brazil, and I think I said before Western China, Eastern China. My apologies. So essentially, those are the areas that look like they're hitting the biggest problem areas. Individual charts for different countries will show different results. A few of the countries in the Middle East have Gemini rising signs, so they're particularly vulnerable. Any country which was founded between May 15th and June 15th, or between December 15th and January 15th, is going to be vulnerable over the next few months until Saturn enters Capricorn. Now, when Saturn enters Capricorn, essentially you're going to see shifts and changes and new institutions taking place. So these past 2 years have been really at times of attacks on higher education institutions, religions, places of worship, which we've seen before. And I hope I'm not being sacrilegious, but we had a lot of attacks in malls in the United